When my wife went into early labor, the only emergency exit out of our building was welded shut. She gave birth on the hallway floor because our HOA president thought a wheelchair ramp made the neighborhood look unpleasant. I'm a structural engineer. I design buildings to save lives. But that night I realized one woman's obsession with control almost took mine. It started 3 weeks before the baby was due. The sun was blazing that afternoon when Brenda Nash, our HOA president, marched up to my house holding a violation notice like it was a badge of honor. "Remove the ramp, Mr. Morales. The board's already voted." She said it like a judge passing sentence. I remember staring at the padlock she'd ordered bolted to the side gate, our emergency egress, and asking if she understood what she'd just done. She smiled that cold, polished kind of smile that people wear when they think rules make them invincible. "Your ramp violated aesthetic continuity," she said. "We all make sacrifices." My wife Laura was standing behind me, one hand on her pregnant belly, the other gripping the door frame for balance. She was pale tired, fighting another dizzy spell. "That's an emergency exit," I told Brenda. "By law, it has to stay clear." She didn't even blink. "You're out of compliance," she said, her voice firm, but her confidence cracking just a little when I replied, "I wrote parts of the safety code you're breaking." That was the moment she realized I wasn't another homeowner quoting Google. I was someone who knew exactly what she'd done and how dangerous it was. She handed me the notice like she was handing me a challenge. "You have until sundown," she said, and walked off, the padlock glinting behind her like a symbol of arrogance. Inside, Laura sat on the couch, breathing slowly. "You shouldn't have confronted her," she whispered. "Stress isn't good for the baby." I took her hand and promised her it would be fine, but I wasn't sure I believed it. By that evening, the HOA had already posted about us on the resident portal. "Unauthorized modification removed for community safety." Comments flooded in, some praising Brenda for keeping standards high, others confused why a ramp could possibly be dangerous. I scrolled through them, feeling my jaw tighten. Then a message popped up from Naomi Patel, one of the older residents. "Ethan, my walker, barely fits through that front door. If they lock the side gate again, how are we supposed to evacuate?" That one hit me hard. It wasn't just about us anymore. Brenda's pride had turned safety into a privilege. I started documenting everything: measurements, timestamps, photos, code references. Not a rant on social media, real documentation. If she wanted a paper war, I'd give her blueprints. The next morning I saw Marcus, the maintenance guy, coiling a hose outside. He looked exhausted. "She's got everyone running doubles," he muttered when I asked how he was. When I mentioned the gate, he froze. "You know it's illegal to lock that exit, right?" He looked down, voice barely a whisper. "She said if I didn't remove the ramp, I'd be fired." I felt a mix of pity and fury. "Marcus," I said quietly, "when something goes wrong, and it will, she won't take the blame. You will." He swallowed hard but said nothing. Still, I saw it in his eyes, guilt, maybe the first crack in her control. A few days later I heard metal grinding at dawn. Outside, a contractor was welding something near the parking lot. Marcus stood nearby, watching nervously. "What's going on?" I asked. The man didn't look up. Board ordered some lock adjustments. I took one step closer. At 6 in the morning I snapped a photo as sparks flew. The contractor cursed. "You can't take pictures of this." I smiled. "If it's in public view, I can." When they left, the smell of burnt steel lingered in the air. I touched the fresh weld they'd sealed the latch completely shut. No quick release, no override. A death trap disguised as a safety measure. That night I sat awake at the kitchen table, staring at the photos on my laptop. Laura was asleep on the couch, one hand on her stomach. I thought about my father, the fire, the jammed door, the minutes that cost him his life. I had promised I'd never let that happen again. But somehow, here I was in a home with the same risk. I felt powerless, small, like I was failing her. Failing both of them. For a moment I almost gave up. You can't win against people like Brenda, I thought. They hide behind committees, rules, fine print. Maybe I should just move. Maybe I should let it go. But then I looked at the ultrasound photo on the fridge. Laura had taped it next to the HOA notice. 2 pieces of paper side by side, one threatening fines, the other promising a future. That was all it took. I wasn't quitting. The next morning I filed a formal complaint with the city. Photos, timestamps, contractor names, everything. The clerk raised her eyebrows. "You sure this is accurate?" she asked. "I'm a licensed engineer," I said, "and I watched them weld that gate shut while my pregnant wife lives there." She stamped the report hard enough to echo. "We'll send an inspector immediately." That night Laura woke me up gasping. "Ethan, something's wrong." She was doubled over, clutching her stomach. The app on her phone showed irregular contractions too early. I called 911, rattling off details, and told them to enter through the side gate. The operator paused. "Sir, what's the code?" My blood turned to ice. "It's welded shut." I bolted outside barefoot. The chain was still there, gleaming under the streetlight. I yanked it until my hands burned, slammed my shoulder into the door. Nothing. Behind me I heard Laura cry out. Sirens grew louder, closer, but the ambulance stopped outside the front gate. "Code's locked out," one of them yelled. "They'll have to cut it," I screamed back. The lead medic grabbed a hydraulic cutter, sparks flying as the metal screamed. Laura was on the floor, sweat streaming down her face, whispering, "This shouldn't be happening here." When the gate finally gave way, the paramedics rushed in. "Who the hell welded this?" one shouted. "The HOA," I said, my voice shaking. "Make sure you write that down." By the time they wheeled her out, I was standing alone in the courtyard, staring at the half-melted lock. In that silence, something inside me hardened. Brenda had turned negligence into cruelty. Now I'd turn her arrogance into evidence. The next day Marcus found me by the stairs. "Is Laura okay?" he asked, eyes full of shame. "She's stable," I said. "The baby's early but strong. You should thank those paramedics, not Brenda's rules." He nodded. Then his voice dropped. "She's deleting records, pulling the camera drives. But the system makes hidden backups. I set them up. She doesn't know." I looked at him, stunned. "You're sure?" He nodded. "Third cabinet in the supply room. Password's her dog's name. Paisley." I laughed because of course it was. That was the missing piece. Photos were proof. Video was conviction. That night I spent hours recovering footage, the welds, the contractor, even the moment the paramedics had to cut the gate. I rebuilt the property model in my design software, simulated emergency response times. The numbers were brutal: 3-minute delay. Enough to kill someone. I compiled it all under my engineer's seal. By morning the report was ready. Brenda tried to bury me in paperwork. I buried her in data. The following day I was at the Maple Crest Community Hall setting up evidence when she walked in. Clipboard in hand, smile sharpened to hide panic. "Early setup for the meeting?" she asked. "How efficient?" "Just verifying a few things," I said without looking up. "You know, Ethan, maybe we got off on the wrong foot," she started. "You're clearly passionate about safety, but this crusade, it's making people uncomfortable." I turned to her. "You welded a gate shut and almost killed my wife and child. I'd call that uncomfortable." Her mask cracked for half a second. "Watch your tone. You're still a resident here. And you're still under city code," I said. "You might want to read it sometime." She laughed, cold and brittle. "You think your little report scares me? The board stands by me." I leaned in. "The board doesn't know half of what you've done, but they will." The next morning at 9 a.m. sharp, the city inspector arrived. Helen Park, mid-40s, calm, focused, no patience for nonsense. She crouched by the gate, traced a finger along the weld, and muttered, "Unauthorized modification of an emergency egress." "That's serious." Brenda approached, voice sugar-coated. "Good morning, I wasn't aware of any inspection." Helen didn't even look up. "We're responding to a formal obstruction complaint." Brenda's smile faltered. "This resident has a personal issue with the board. Personal motivation doesn't negate physical evidence," Helen said flatly. Marcus was nearby, pretending to sweep hands, trembling. When Helen asked about the fire panel inspection, he spoke up. "Vendor canceled. She told me to mark it complete anyway." The silence that followed was deafening. Brenda tried to recover. "We can appeal." "You can cooperate," Helen interrupted, "or explain it to a judge." She taped a bright yellow notice to the gate. "Under city compliance review." Neighbors started gathering. Naomi with her walker. Alan Wu clutching his coffee, looking pale. Brenda's power, once absolute, started crumbling right there in the sunlight. That evening the board held an emergency meeting. Every seat in the community hall was filled. Residents packed the aisles, whispering, waiting. Brenda sat in the center, jaw clenched, while Helen stood beside me, clipboard in hand. Brenda tapped the microphone. "Tonight's meeting concerns the resident responsible for this chaos." I stood. That resident would be me. My voice echoed calm and steady. And I didn't file a complaint to humiliate anyone. I filed it because my wife almost died behind your welded gate. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Alan shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't authorize that," he muttered. "You didn't?" I said. "But she did." I held up the binder. "Contractor invoices, timestamps, video footage, all from your own system." Brenda shot up from her chair. "You stole those files." Helen raised her voice. "He didn't. They were obtained under whistleblower protection. Every violation he listed is confirmed: fire code breaches, falsified reports, misuse of funds." The room exploded. Someone shouted, "You risked our lives." Another, "You fined me for leaving a trash can out while you broke the law." Brenda slammed her gavel, yelling for order. No one listened. The community she'd ruled with fear was finally awake. "This isn't revenge," I said into the mic when the noise subsided. "It's accountability. I promised my father I'd never let bureaucracy cost someone their life again. That promise started with a ramp and ends with this." Helen stepped forward, reading from the order. "Effective immediately. Maple Crest HOA is under city supervision. All safety decisions transferred to municipal oversight pending investigation." Alan Wu stood, removed his badge, and placed it on the table. "We lost sight of why we're here," he said quietly. "I'm done." Applause broke out. One person, then a dozen, then the entire hall. Brenda shouted over the noise, but her words vanished under the sound of people reclaiming their voice. I walked out into the night air. The welded gate gleamed under the floodlights, the same one that once trapped us. Tomorrow it would be cut open for good. I rested my hand on the cold metal, felt the faint groove where the weld had scarred it, and whispered, "You wanted control, Brenda. Now the city controls you." Sometimes justice doesn't roar, it measures, calculates, and strikes where the evidence is strongest. Lesson: when power hides behind rules, the truth needs no permission to open the gate.